Billionaire's card declined. Then a little black girl did the unthinkable. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's unbelievable story. It was a rainy Thursday evening at one of the most luxurious restaurants in downtown New York. The kind of place where celebrities and business moguls gather for their exclusive dinners. The chandeliers were sparkling above, casting a soft glow across the polished marble floors, and the buzz of hushed conversations filled the air. At a corner table, billionaire Richard Stanton sat with his associates, surrounded by the lavish decor and the finest wine. He was a towering figure in the business world, known for his ruthless deals and larger-than-life persona. He had built his empire from scratch and prided himself on being a self-made man. He was used to getting what he wanted, and tonight was no different. He was finalizing a major acquisition with his team, and everything seemed to be going as planned. But what Richard didn't anticipate was the one small detail that would shake him to his core. As the night went on, Richard's associates ordered more drinks, laughing and talking, their voices blending with the clinking of glasses. Eventually, it was time to settle the bill. Richard took out his sleek black credit card, confident that he could handle the expensive tab. But when the waiter swiped the card, the machine displayed a message that sent a chill down his spine. Declined. Richard frowned, then tried again. And again, the message appeared, declined. His face turned red with frustration. He slapped the card on the table, muttering under his breath. His associates exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was happening. Richard couldn't believe it. This had never happened to him before. As he struggled to understand what was going on, the room fell into an awkward silence. The waiter stood there, hesitant. Richard shot him an angry look. "What's going on?" "This is a mistake," he snapped. But the waiter remained calm, checking the card's details once more. "I'm afraid the card has been declined, sir. There must be some sort of issue." Richard's temper flared. He stood up abruptly, throwing the waiter a look of disdain. The waiter, a young black girl named Tiana, was no stranger to rude customers. But what happened next was something she had never imagined. As Richard's anger grew, his insults became sharper, louder. "Typical," he muttered. "A young girl working at a place like this and still doesn't know how to do her job." His voice was filled with condescension, and he didn't seem to care who heard him. Tiana, standing near the table, was used to people looking down on her, used to the snide remarks. But this time, something inside her snapped. She took a deep breath and calmly walked up to Richard, who was still seething with rage. What she did next would not only surprise him, but everyone in the restaurant. As Tiana stood in front of Richard, the tension in the air was thick. The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Richard, still fuming, sneered at her, expecting her to back down like every other server who had ever been humiliated by his wealth and power. He crossed his arms, the lines of his custom-made suit stretching over his broad shoulders, and glared at her. Tiana took a deep breath and, without flinching, looked him straight in the eye. There was no fear in her gaze, only calm resolve. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her own card. Richard raised an eyebrow, confused. What was she doing? Without saying a word, Tiana walked over to the machine, swiped her card, and waited as the screen flashed with a confirmation. The transaction was approved. The room fell silent. Richard's face went from red with anger to pale with disbelief. How could this be? A simple young girl, one he had mocked and belittled, had done what he couldn't. Tiana looked back at him, and for a moment, there was a strange calmness in her voice when she spoke. "It's not about the money, Mr. Stanton. It's about integrity." The words hit Richard like a ton of bricks. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had no response. He had been the one to judge her, to think his money could solve every problem. But now, in this moment, his pride had been shattered. Tiana handed him the receipt, still not looking away. "Next time, maybe treat people with a little more respect," she said, her voice steady and strong. The words stung. Richard looked around, his face contorting with humiliation. The rest of the restaurant was now watching him closely, some looking away awkwardly, others whispering among themselves. He could feel their eyes on him, eyes that had once admired his wealth, now seeing him for what he truly was. A man who had been so blinded by his own arrogance that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. The moment stretched on, and Richard's mind raced. He knew he was caught. There was no way he could save face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, slamming it onto the table. "Take your tip," he muttered, his voice a mixture of anger and shame. But Tiana didn't move. She didn't need his money. She didn't want it. Instead, she simply smiled, shook her head, and walked away, leaving him standing there, alone with his pride and the reality of what he had just experienced. As Tiana made her way back to the kitchen, the whispers in the restaurant didn't stop. People were talking, their words rising in volume as they processed what had just happened. Some of them had known about Richard's reputation, how he treated others like they were beneath him. But now, they saw a different side of him. And they were seeing Tiana for the first time too. The quiet, humble waitress who had just turned the tables on a man who thought he owned the world. As Tiana passed through the kitchen door, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a person who had the power to stand up for herself, to speak out against injustice, and to show others that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, was above respect. In that moment, she realized that sometimes it wasn't about the money. It was about knowing your worth, standing your ground, and never letting anyone take that away from you. The room remained eerily quiet as Tiana walked away from Richard's table. Her heart was steady, but she could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air, the collective gaze of the restaurant, pressing down on her. As she passed through the swinging kitchen doors, the silence outside seemed to follow her. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension, but she couldn't ignore the rush of pride mixed with disbelief. She had done it. She had faced down a billionaire, and in that split second, she had changed the entire narrative. Back in the kitchen, her fellow workers watched her closely. Some were whispering, others giving her nods of silent approval. Tiana had never been one for attention, but tonight, everything was different. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who had stood her ground against power, against a man who had tried to belittle her and everyone around him. The head chef, Marcus, gave her a quiet thumbs up. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eye said everything. Tiana was about to finish her shift, but something told her she wouldn't be going home the same person she had come in as. A few moments later, as Tiana gathered her belongings, the restaurant manager, Elaine, approached her. She was the last person Tiana expected to talk to her, especially after what had just happened. Elaine was known for her professionalism, never getting involved in the drama between staff and customers. But tonight, she walked straight up to Tiana, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Tiana, I want you to know, you handled that situation perfectly," she said, her voice low. "We all saw what happened. That was something. Richard Stanton may have the money, but you showed everyone here who really has the power." Tiana was taken aback. She had never expected praise from the management, especially after the way she had stood up to a high-paying customer. "Thank you," Tiana replied softly. Elaine gave her a small smile before continuing. "Listen, I'm not going to say this in front of the others, but you've earned something tonight." Tiana looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Elaine leaned in slightly, glancing around to make sure no one else could overhear. "We've been talking about offering you a promotion to floor supervisor. You've got the kind of composure that's rare around here." Tiana's eyes widened. This was the last thing she expected to hear. A promotion? After what had just happened? She had been working at the restaurant for over a year, but she never imagined she would be considered for a higher position, especially not after standing up to one of their most important clients. But there it was. I don't know what to say," Tiana managed, her voice full of surprise. "You've already said it by showing us what real strength looks like. Think about it, okay?" Elaine said, giving her a nod before walking away. Tiana stood frozen for a moment, trying to process everything. The promotion was unexpected, but the feeling of being respected, not just for her work, but for her character, was something she had never felt before. She wasn't just another employee in a uniform. She was a person who had the power to make a difference. As she left the restaurant that night, the city's lights glittering against the night sky, Tiana felt a surge of pride and hope. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had opened a door to new possibilities. As she walked down the street, She couldn't help but think about the moment when Richard Stanton had been left speechless. He had underestimated her, thinking his money could solve everything. But money couldn't buy what she had just shown him: the power of self-respect, integrity, and the ability to stand up against the odds. The next day, news about the incident spread quickly, and by the afternoon, Richard Stanton's company issued a public statement apologizing for his behavior. They announced that he would be taking a step back from public events for a while, to reflect on his actions. It wasn't the kind of apology that Tiana had expected, but it was enough to let her know that her actions had made an impact. She didn't need the validation, but it still felt good to know that she had forced someone like Richard Stanton to confront his arrogance. Tiana smiled to herself as she looked out the window of the subway train, heading home. This was just the beginning of something new. She had shown the world, and more importantly, herself, that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, could make her feel small again. I want to take you back to a few days after that unforgettable night. Tiana couldn't believe how quickly things had changed. As she walked through the streets of New York, she felt a sense of quiet confidence that she had never experienced before. The weight of her actions had lifted a burden she didn't even know she was carrying. For so long, she had been invisible to the world, dismissed by so many because of her age, her background, and her job. But now, she was different. The restaurant had become a different place for her after the night with Richard Stanton. Tiana's co-workers now looked at her with respect, admiration even. She could feel the shift in how they treated her. It wasn't just the promotion Elaine had offered her, though that was a nice gesture. It was the way she was seen, the way she was valued now. Even some of the regular customers began to acknowledge her in a way that felt real. It was a little thing, but it meant everything to her. She had earned it. A few days later, Tiana was standing in the employee break room, sorting through her shift schedule when Elaine walked in. Tiana had been feeling a little overwhelmed lately, trying to juggle work with the sudden responsibilities that came with being promoted to floor supervisor. But as always, she handled it with grace. Elaine smiled at her, holding something in her hand. "Tiana, I just wanted to let you know, after everything that happened with Richard, we've been getting a lot of calls," Elaine said, her voice soft yet filled with purpose. "A lot of people have noticed how you handled the situation, and to be honest, it's been nothing short of impressive." Tiana raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was going. "What do you mean?" Elaine continued. "We've received a request from Stanton's team. They want to meet with you." Tiana felt her heart skip a beat. "What? Why?" "They want to apologize to you personally. Richard specifically requested the meeting. They want to make things right," Elaine said. Tiana stood still for a moment, processing the news. She had never imagined that after standing up to Richard, she would be offered an apology. She had expected nothing from him. But now, it seemed like everything was coming full circle. "I don't know if I want to meet with him," Tiana said, her voice uncertain. "Why not?" Elaine asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's just that. I don't need his apology," Tiana replied. "I didn't do it for him. I did it for myself. For the respect I deserve." Elaine nodded. "Understanding. I get it. But just think about it. It could be a chance to show him what real power looks like. It might help him see things differently." Tiana took a deep breath. The thought of facing Richard again made her uneasy, but a part of her knew that this was another opportunity to take control of the narrative. She had already stood up to him once. This time, she could do it on her terms. She agreed to the meeting, but on one condition: she would not apologize for what had happened. She would stand firm, just like she had before. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. When Tiana arrived at the high-end office building where Stanton's company was headquartered, she couldn't help but feel a little out of place. The building was sleek, modern, and imposing, everything that Richard represented. But Tiana wasn't intimidated. She had been through too much to let a building like this shake her. When she entered the meeting room, Richard was sitting at the table, his posture stiff and formal. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Miss Tiana, thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. Tiana nodded, standing tall. "I didn't come here to make peace, Mr. Stanton. I came to make sure you understood something. The way you treated me was wrong, but I did what I did because I know my worth. And no one can take that away from me." Richard's eyes softened slightly, but he didn't say anything for a moment. Finally, he spoke. "I owe you an apology, Tiana. I was arrogant. I thought I could walk over people like you, but you proved me wrong." Tiana met his gaze, unflinching. You don't owe me anything, Richard. You've already apologized in the only way that matters, by acknowledging your mistake. For the first time, she saw a flicker of humility in his eyes. I've learned a lot from this, Tiana, he said quietly. You're a force to be reckoned with. I respect that. Tiana nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over her. She didn't need his approval, but it felt good to know that even someone like Richard Stanton could be humbled by what she had done. As she left the meeting, the weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders. She had taken control, and now she was finally free. I want to take you to a moment a few weeks after that defining meeting with Richard Stanton. Tiana had returned to her regular routine, but something was different. The people around her noticed it, and she noticed it too. She was standing taller, walking with purpose, no longer hiding in the shadows of others. Even though Richard had apologized, it wasn't his apology that changed her life. It was the quiet, unwavering confidence she had found within herself. The promotion had given her the platform to lead with integrity, and she embraced it fully. Tiana wasn't just managing the floor anymore. She was making decisions, setting the tone for the restaurant. She wasn't a passive participant in her life. She was the one creating the path ahead. It was a Tuesday evening when Tiana received a call that would further solidify the changes happening in her life. It was Elaine, the restaurant manager. Tiana, we've been offered a partnership with Stanton's company. They want to include us in their new project. They specifically requested you to be the liaison. The words hit Tiana like a wave, and for a moment, she was silent. Stanton's company was one of the most influential in the industry. A partnership with them could change everything for the restaurant. But to be the one they trusted? It was both exciting and intimidating. Me? Tiana asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes. They said that you showed them what true leadership looks like. Richard specifically said you were the person who made him rethink everything. Elaine's words were powerful. Tiana had known that Richard's apology had meant something, but this was another level. It was a chance to prove that people like her, people from backgrounds like hers, could be leaders, that they could be seen for more than their roles. I'm in. Let's do it, Tiana replied. The decision was made. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Tiana met with Richard and his team several times, discussing the future of the partnership. The meetings were professional, but there was an unspoken respect between them now. Richard wasn't the same man who had tried to belittle her. He was the one seeking her expertise. Tiana's influence in the room was undeniable. Slowly, other leaders in the industry began to take notice of her, inviting her to conferences, offering her speaking engagements. What had started as a moment of humiliation for Richard Stanton had turned into a moment of elevation for Tiana. She didn't just survive that night, she thrived. One evening, a few months later, Tiana was hosting a charity event at the restaurant. It was a packed house, with some of the most influential figures in the city attending. Tiana had become a symbol of transformation, someone who had gone from being dismissed to being the one in control. As she stood at the front of the room, greeting guests, she couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. She had faced adversity, been underestimated, and yet, here she was, leading a successful event, making a difference in her community, and being seen for who she truly was. Her mother, who had always believed in her, was in the audience, watching with pride. It was a moment that meant more to Tiana than any recognition or praise she had ever received. Her mother had been there through every struggle, every setback, and now, she was seeing her daughter standing tall in a room full of powerful people. The night went off without a hitch. Guests mingled, donations flowed in, and the atmosphere was one of hope and celebration. As the event wound down, Tiana took a moment to step outside, to breathe in the cool evening air. She smiled to herself, feeling the weight of everything she had accomplished. From that moment when she had stood up to Richard Stanton, to the partnerships she had helped build, to the respect she had earned, not just from others, but from herself. Tiana knew that she had proven something far greater than any deal or apology. She had proven that a person's worth could never be defined by the money they had or the title they held. It was the strength inside them, the integrity they carried, and the courage to stand up, no matter the odds, that truly mattered. And with that, she knew her journey had only just begun. Tiana stood at the front of the room, the evening sunlight streaming through the large windows of the new office building she had helped design. The once uncertain young woman, who had worked as a waitress and been dismissed by the world, was now the CEO of her own company. Her company, which she had built from the ground up, was now one of the leading firms in the city, with a strong reputation for integrity, innovation, and social responsibility. As she looked out over the city, she could hardly believe how far she had come. The story that had started with a simple act of standing up to a billionaire in a restaurant had turned into something much bigger. It had evolved into a movement, one that empowered others like her. People from humble beginnings who had been overlooked and underestimated by society. She had taken her experience and turned it into a platform for change. She had created a company that not only focused on making a profit, but also focused on making a difference. She had used her success to give back to the community, funding scholarships for underprivileged youth, providing mentorship for women in business, and supporting initiatives for racial equality. As Tiana settled into her new role, she never forgot where she came from. Her roots were what kept her grounded, and the lessons she had learned along the way shaped the way she led her company. It wasn't just about the bottom line, it was about the people. The same people who had once ignored her, treated her like she didn't matter, were now the ones she sought to help and uplift. She remembered how Richard Stanton, the billionaire who had once belittled her, had been the catalyst for this change. After their meeting, things had shifted not only for him, but for Tiana as well. He had been forced to confront his own arrogance, while she had been given the chance to prove her worth. She had done more than survive that night. She had thrived. She had proven to herself and to the world that a person's value was not determined by their wealth, status, or background, but by their actions, integrity, and the strength to stand up for what was right. Over the months, Richard had become a supporter of Tiana's work, not as a benefactor, but as a believer in her vision. He had seen the impact she was making and had decided to use his resources to help her grow her business. It was a strange turn of events, but one that had shaped the path they both walked. Tiana was no longer just a symbol of overcoming adversity. She was now an agent of change in a world that often overlooked people like her. As the launch party for her latest initiative came to a close, Tiana stood outside, looking up at the bright lights of the city. The sound of traffic and laughter filled the air, but for a moment, everything felt still. She had done it. She had taken the unexpected, the unimaginable, and turned it into something beautiful. She had rewritten her story and, in doing so, had given others the chance to rewrite theirs. She wasn't just the girl who had stood up to Richard Stanton anymore. She was the woman who had changed the game. And as she looked around at the faces of the people who had come to support her, she knew that this was just the beginning. The best was yet to come. Tiana had come a long way since the night she had stood up to Richard Stanton. Her business was thriving, her influence growing, and the world was finally starting to recognize her for who she truly was. But the journey was not without its challenges. As her company expanded, she found herself facing new obstacles, competition, doubts from some of her employees, and the ever-present pressure to succeed. Tiana had always believed that success wasn't just about wealth or status, but about making an impact. She had created her company with a vision to change the way the industry viewed leadership, diversity, and social responsibility. However, as the stakes got higher, she realized that she needed to continue evolving. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Tiana sat in her office, staring at the skyline of New York. The city was alive with energy, but she felt a momentary sense of exhaustion. She had built something remarkable, but she also knew that sustaining it would require even more. She wasn't the same young woman who had worked as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. She was a CEO now, a leader in her field, but with leadership came the weight of responsibility. Just then, her phone rang. It was Elaine, the restaurant manager who had been her mentor and confidant since the beginning. "Tiana, I just wanted to check in with you," Elaine said, her voice warm and steady. "How are you holding up?" Tiana smiled, grateful for the familiar voice. "I'm good, just tired. The work never stops, you know." Elaine chuckled. "I know that feeling all too well. But I also know that you've got something special. You've got the kind of vision that doesn't come around often." Tiana paused, taking in Elaine's words. She had always trusted her instincts, but there were moments when doubt crept in. "I appreciate that, Elaine. But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. I've come so far, but there's always this feeling like I'm not doing enough to make a real difference." Elaine's tone became serious. "Tiana, Don't forget why you started. You've already changed so many lives. Look at what you've done for the young women in the industry, for the community, for everyone who's ever been overlooked or underestimated. What you're doing is important. Tiana felt a lump in her throat. It was easy to get caught up in the daily grind and lose sight of the bigger picture. But Elaine was right. She had created a ripple effect, a movement that went beyond just one company or one person. Tiana had made it clear that no matter where you came from, you could achieve greatness if you stayed true to yourself and worked hard. Thanks, Elaine. I needed to hear that, Tiana said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. You're welcome, Tiana. Just keep going. You've got this. After hanging up, Tiana sat back in her chair, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. She had transformed from a waitress into a leader. She had turned her struggles into strength and her setbacks into stepping stones. She had proven that no dream was too big, no challenge too great. But the journey was far from over. There was still so much to be done, and Tiana knew that the real work was just beginning. Over the next few months, Tiana poured herself into expanding her company's reach. She made connections with other businesses, worked tirelessly on new projects, and made sure that her values of integrity, diversity, and community remained at the core of everything she did. And as her company continued to grow, so did her influence. People were beginning to take notice, not just of her business, but of the way she had built it. Tiana wasn't just a success story. She was a model for how success could be achieved with heart, passion, and purpose. As the years passed, Tiana's name became synonymous with innovation and leadership. She had proven that it wasn't the money or the power that made a person influential. It was their ability to make a real, lasting difference. And as she stood at the forefront of a movement that was reshaping industries and communities, Tiana knew that this was only the beginning. Her story, the story of the waitress who had stood up to a billionaire and changed the world, would inspire generations to come. Tiana sat quietly in her office, the soft hum of the city outside her window a constant reminder of how far she had come. The past few years had been a whirlwind, transforming her business, breaking barriers, and becoming a figure of empowerment for so many people who had once been told they could never succeed. But despite her success, there was still a lingering feeling inside her, something she couldn't quite shake. She knew that she had built something incredible, but was it enough? Was it enough to change the world in the way she had always dreamed? Her company had grown rapidly, her influence had expanded, but now, as she looked out at the skyline, she realized that the journey was far from over. She had made a difference, but there was still so much more to do. A soft knock on her door broke her reverie. It was Elaine, her trusted mentor, and the person who had helped guide her through the early days. She smiled warmly as she entered. Hey, Tiana. You okay? Tiana nodded, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. Yeah, just thinking, she said. Elaine took a seat across from her, sensing that something was weighing on her. What's on your mind? Tiana sighed. I've done so much, but I keep wondering if it's enough. I've helped people, I've built something real, but what if there's still more I should be doing? Elaine smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. Tiana, what you've done is extraordinary. You've changed the game. But I understand the pressure you're feeling. You've reached a place where you can now inspire and empower even more people. Tiana looked down for a moment, her thoughts racing. I don't want to just be a success story. I want to be the change. I want to show others that no matter where they come from, they can break through. But how do I do that on a larger scale? Elaine leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. You've already started. Look at what you've done. You've built a company that's based on more than profit. You've created a culture that values integrity, diversity, and community. You're a role model to countless people. Tiana nodded slowly. But I think I can do more. I don't want to just lead a company. I want to lead a movement. Elaine smiled. And you will, Tiana. That's what you've been doing all along. It's not about changing the world all at once. It's about changing it, piece by piece, day by day. Tiana took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. Elaine was right. The change she sought wouldn't come from one grand gesture or a single act. It would come from continuing to do the work, to build on the foundation she had created, to keep leading with purpose. As the days passed, Tiana's focus shifted. She started new initiatives within her company, expanding her influence into communities that had been overlooked for too long. She partnered with organizations that championed education, women's rights, and racial equality, using her platform to bring these issues to the forefront. She worked tirelessly to make sure that her success didn't just benefit her. It benefited everyone who needed a hand up. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, but with each step she took, Tiana knew she was on the right path. And slowly but surely, her vision began to take shape. She wasn't just leading a company anymore. She was leading a movement of change. Years passed, and Tiana's company continued to grow, but what was even more powerful was the ripple effect of her work. People who had once been told they weren't enough, that they didn't belong, began to see a different path. They started their own businesses, became leaders in their communities, and made their own mark on the world. Tiana had sparked something inside them, something she had once found in herself, the belief that they too could break through. And as she stood in front of a crowd at one of her company's charity events, with thousands of people cheering her on, Tiana realized that she had done it. She had become the change she had always dreamed of, and in doing so, had helped others do the same. The world was a different place now, and Tiana had played a part in making it that way. The young waitress, who had once been dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked, had now become a symbol of hope, strength, and the power of resilience. And as she looked out at the faces in the crowd, she knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where anything was possible. Tiana stood on the stage, the bright lights above casting a warm glow over the crowd. The cheers of thousands of people filled the room, and as she took in the sight, a sense of fulfillment washed over her. This was a moment she had dreamed of for so long, but it wasn't about the applause or the accolades. It was about the journey that had brought her here, the battles she had fought, and the people who had stood by her side. From the humble beginnings of serving tables, being underestimated and looked down upon, to now standing as the CEO of her own successful business, Tiana knew this was just the beginning. Her story had started with a single act of courage, standing up to Richard Stanton, a billionaire who had treated her as insignificant. But what that moment had sparked was far greater than a confrontation. It had ignited a fire within her, a passion to prove that anyone, no matter their background, could achieve greatness. That moment had propelled her forward, leading her to build a company that not only thrived but also gave back. Her business had become a platform for change, a beacon of hope for those who had been overlooked, marginalized, and dismissed. Through her initiatives, Tiana had created scholarships, mentorship programs, and opportunities for those who had once been told they didn't belong. She had built an empire not on greed or vanity, but on the principles of integrity, empathy, and empowerment. As she looked out at the crowd, her eyes scanned the faces of the people who had come to support her, her family, her friends, her employees, and even strangers who had been touched by her work. They were the reason she kept going, the reason she pushed through the hardest times. They believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, and now they were witnessing her success. Tiana had proven that success wasn't defined by the wealth or status you had, but by the impact you made on the lives of others. She had shown that no matter where you came from, no matter how small or insignificant others may make you feel, you could rise. But it wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that she had always been worthy of success. She had always had the strength to overcome the odds, to push past the obstacles, and to keep fighting even when the world seemed to tell her to quit. Her journey had been filled with moments of doubt, pain, and uncertainty. There were times when she felt like giving up, times when the weight of her responsibilities seemed too heavy to bear. But through it all, she had persevered. And now, standing on this stage, Tiana realized that the greatest success was not the wealth, the recognition, or the accolades. It was the person she had become. The woman who had learned to trust herself. The woman who had found her voice and used it to inspire others. The woman who had changed the world. And as she spoke to the crowd, her voice steady and full of conviction, she knew that her story would continue to inspire. It would inspire the young girls who dreamed of a better life, the men and women who fought for justice, and the dreamers who refused to let their circumstances define their future. Tiana's journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. As she concluded her speech, she smiled, knowing that the ripple effect of her actions would continue to spread, creating a legacy of hope and change that would last for generations. She had stood up, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. And in doing so, she had rewritten the narrative, not just for herself, but for the world. Discover the inspiring journey of a young woman who transformed her life from being underestimated and overlooked to becoming a powerful figure in the business world. This Black story highlights the strength, determination, and courage of an individual who fought against all odds and proved that success is not determined by your background, but by your ability to rise above adversity. From the moment she stood up to a billionaire, this Black story continues to inspire others who have faced discrimination, rejection, and hardship. As she built a successful company, Tiana became a symbol of empowerment, showing that no matter where you come from, you can achieve greatness. This Black story is about more than just personal success. It's about creating a lasting impact on others and using your platform to uplift communities. Tiana's story is proof that one person's journey can spark a movement, leading to a world where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. As she continues to break barriers, this Black story demonstrates the power of self-belief, integrity, and resilience in the face of challenge. Join us in celebrating this extraordinary tale of overcoming obstacles, changing the narrative, and proving that Black stories deserve to be heard and celebrated.